My friends and I are rushing towards the first major battle on this Minecraft war server. This fight will impact the next hundreds of battles. CCNet is a geopolitical server set to a realistic map of the Earth and has a long history of war, diplomacy, trade, and so much more. This is the thrilling story of my 3-year-long journey on this lively server. But to start, we need to go back to the beginning. After almost 8 months of hype, Nations 2 final releases. Hundreds of players swarmed trying to get in. There was a massive queue of players waiting in a hub hours before the server released. I was definitely not one of these players. And the first town created was by my friend Chicken. Many other towns were created that same day, but my town was called Kiev. A few days later, I created the first nation with Nasriv and Luva, and a few of my other friends. While other nations focused on trade or naval power, we focused almost entirely on our PvP skill. One of the first feuds on the server start with Spain and Britain. This is quite complicated and I can't be bothered to explain in depth, but basically they don't like each other. And they try to steal and kill each other a lot, and some other stuff happen. They just don't have a good relationship. Also there's some other feuds like Japan's fighting over who owns Japan, United States fighting over who owns the United States. But those were both pretty small scale sieges without a lot of fighting. Carthage and Shinsei are both big nations in Africa that went to war with each other. And Carthage sieged Shinsei's capital, but Shinsei was able to win this siege and they counter-sieged. I got a little involved in this war because I felt bad for the builder of Carthage, whose town kinda got destroyed, but other than that, I didn't really do much. No one really won that war though, and it was kind of put on a standstill. Carthage, with the help of Spain and some Teutonic members, sieged Roma, an important town in Republica. Republica was backed by Britain and Shinsei in this siege, but Republica was not able to compete with the combined Spanish and Teutonic PvPers. The siege was almost over, and it looked like Carthage was going to win by a landslide, until something happened. Something that would impact alliances for over a year. My nation, Teutonic, switched. Initially, I tried to stay neutral with most nations not wanting to get involved in too many conflicts, because we had the most PvPers by far, with only Spain being able to compete, so it kind of discouraged players to fight. But we failed at staying neutral, and we were kind of hungry for fights. So we helped Republica win this siege. Carthage was kind of confused and didn't want to fight their allies, so they just let Republica win. This would not be forgotten by Republica or Shinsei. An alliance was formed after this. But it definitely was not forgotten by Thunder, the leader of Carthage. And this would be the first of many cracks to form between the Carthage and Teutonic alliance. Some other fighting happens with Shinsei and Carthage again, but nothing big until Spain announces that they will siege Britain on April 9th. When the time comes though, Britain actually sieges Spain first. Carthage rushed to help defend their allies, and Teutonic was initially going to stay out because, like I said, we tried to stay neutral. But the British recruited some PvPers from other servers to compete with the Spanish. I didn't like that Britain recruited these PvPers because I saw what they could do, and I saw how they could usually turn a pretty good server into a pretty toxic one. Because of this, I decided to help Spain against Britain. And they were my friends too, which also helped. This resulted in the biggest fight on the server so far, but due to an unknown bug, a lot of the British soldiers were invulnerable to all damage, which obviously cemented their victory in that fight. The British PvPers did get bored, and they stopped fighting after this, so the Spanish were able to win the defensive siege. Some fighting happened between Britain and the Spanish allies after this, like at the Gibraltar siege region, but many British players stopped playing. There was mostly peace after this, and no one knew what would happen next. Would the Spanish, Carthaginian, and Teutonic alliance split up? Would Shinsei, Republica, and Britain attack? What about the rest of the world outside of Europe? What was Japan doing? Or America? What happened next? I guarantee no one foresaw. A small town in Scandinavia had popped up and quickly grew in size, and they eventually created a new nation. What was the name? The Nordic Empire. The Nordic Empire would become the most infamous nation on the server, winning wars with crazy numbers and skill. This would be the start of an epic dynasty that would last literal years. A few of their players DM'd me asking about the server, and I fought their best player, Panda Divino. I could immediately tell he was a good player, and he'd often go even or just beat me. After our 1v1s, we decided to ally, and I kinda forgot about them, to be honest. That wasn't until they sieged Britain and utterly demolished them. They had some help from Carthage, but they would have won without it. They had done what Spain, Teutonic, and Carthage combined couldn't do. In a single day! Well, good thing they're my allies. I was offline, doing my own thing, when I was told we were being sieged. We were not ready for a siege at all. I relied on intimidation a lot, and never actually finished my fort, so it was extremely weak. But I never thought anyone would actually siege us. My ego had caused this, and it would always be one of my biggest flaws. So I rushed on with the rest of Teutonic, and we got destroyed. They had broken into our bunker and almost wiped our whole team. I was one of the few surviving players, but to avoid being spawn killed, I had to log out. I had to call my allies for this. There was just no way we could beat them alone. After Britain lost to Nordic, they had actually joined them too, so Nordic was even stronger now and had experienced players to teach them the server mechanics. All I could do was just log on and off and quickly kill players that were isolated from the group.
Body or no?
I'm gonna use a speed pod. I hate using those things.
I hit him. Good luck. Oh, easy.
I thought you were like gonna stop.
Should logs.
I had to do this until the rest of my allies got to Kiev because I couldn't fight them alone. And once my allies did come, there was one big battle.
Alright, get in there, boys. Fucking love you. Neb's getting killed by a fucking skeleton.
Alright, this battle is actually gonna decide the war.
We killed a few. Do you want to go back to the bunker and then?
Honestly, go back to the bunker. You've got a bunch of picks. Like, you may as well do. That's the thing. Like, you can repot and go back out there.
We knew they didn't have the resources to keep fighting. We could resupply in minutes in the Kiev bunker and be right back fighting. But they had to travel all the way back to Scandinavia just to resupply. You see, most of the Nordic players were actually Italian in real life, and it was getting late for them. So many of them logged off after this fight, not wanting to walk back this late at night. This gave us time to collect ourselves and regain some points. And I might have maybe accidentally stayed up all night for this, but no one really knows for sure. When the Nordics woke up, they came back, but this time we were ready. We were winning some of the battles, and I was able to wipe out half their side with a single cannon.
Where people go?
I don't know. No one died. I think they just dipped.
I saw chicken what? Oh.
Jesus Christ.
Definitely a skill and not a bug. More allies started to rush to Kiev from all over the world. This would be the start of the first coalition. This coalition grouped up for one big push against the Nordic capital, Vestfold. This was meant to be a distraction for Kiev, and it worked. We didn't win much of the fighting, and we got wiped after a few hours, but we did distract them long enough to win Kiev. So due to Nordic not being fully prepared, we had won, but barely. I wish I could say the same for Spain. The next week, Nordic would not be holding back. They knew what they needed to do now, and they were ready. They quickly sieged Zafra, the capital of Spain. The coalition members came to help, but some nations were really only in the coalition for Teutonic, not Spain, so it did not receive the same amount of support as Kiev did. Along with this, one of the 3 leaders of Spain, Nabugals, was on vacation to hold siege and he would not be able to fight. Because of this, I felt personally responsible for the protection of Spain, and I would not fail. Neb was there for me when Kiev was sieged. I won't let his town fall, right? I'd like to say it was a close fight, but it really wasn't. We won some battles, but we lost almost all of them. I failed. I failed the coalition. I failed Spain. I failed my friend. After this, the coalition leaders got together and started a plan on what they would do next. Everyone knew Nordic was sieging their coalition town, and the assumption was that it would be Tunis, the capital of Carthage. There was some disagreement between the leaders. Carthage, Spain, and Abbasid believed it was better to siege London, a British town in Nordic, but Teutonic, Shinsei, and Oceanic thought it was better to prepare more. This did cause another crack to form in the Teutonic-Carthage alliance, but we had bigger things to worry about. Carthage went ahead with the siege on London, but it was over pretty fast. After this siege, Spain, Carthage, and Abbasid merged into one nation. This was the start of the SCA alliance. The 3 other big nations in the coalition felt excluded, and another of the many growing cracks formed. The next week, Nordic sieged Tunis. And this time the coalition was actually winning? It looked like it might end up being a coalition victory. But Carthage, who had not prepared and instead used resources fighting in Britain, was starting to run out of pots. We started to lose our pace, and to add to this, Nuxer, the leader of Shinsei, who already had a rocky relationship with Carthage because of the fights before, had left the alliance due to some miscommunication. But this wasn't supported by a majority of the Shinsei members. This led the way for a new king of Shinsei, Bukurtin. who ended up being a very influential player for not only Teutonic, but the rest of the server. The last few hours of the siege, a few of us were able to wipe out almost all the Nordics and get a massive reversal. It was almost looking up for us, but they came back stronger and stopped any chances of victory. Carthage had also fallen. That was the third big nation to fall to Nordic within a month. It was not looking good for the coalition, especially Teutonic, who was next on the murder list. This was it. One final stand. I had to do this for my nation, for my honor, for my friends. One of Nordic's biggest advantages is their unity and communication. They fought super organized and it was hard to find someone alone. This is because they were all close friends who spoke one common language, while our alliance was full of people who didn't know each other from all different time zones and some who didn't even speak English. But we could use this to our advantage. The Nordics would always be offline at the same time, while we at least had a few players who would be on at any time. With this in mind, I organized one of the biggest offensive sieges in history. I built a siege base of every material you would ever need in just a few short hours. And Nordic had no idea. We sieged Vestfold and Paris. While Teutonic was doing this, Zafra and Tunis also revolted. Nordic would wake up to 4 sieges and be already behind. We knew this wasn't enough to win the offensive sieges, but that wasn't the plan. We wanted to set Spain and Carthage free. We tried to scare Nordic enough that they would forget about the revolts. And it worked. Nordic barely tried to fight their revolts, and only focused on the defensive sieges, leaving Spain and Carthage completely open.
Why is Divi here? Why is Divi here? What? How did he one-shot me?
Perfect. Okay, firing another volley.
Turtle!
The next day, Nordic messaged me about peace. They were getting tired and had finals coming up. While we were winning Paris at the time, Vestfold was very much in their favor. I knew they could easily turn Paris around too, and in a few weeks siege Carthage and Spain again and capture them. So I was very much open for peace. However, the rest of the alliance was not. SCA wanted to keep fighting and thought we could win Paris. After some discussion, there was a ceasefire on both sides until we decided on something. However, due to miscommunication again, both sides thought either side broke the ceasefire. So SCA brought the infamous Nebdred to blow up the Paris fort. It was completely flattened to the ground, and Nordic was not happy at all. Neither was I. This would be the final push that would destroy the already broken coalition. Nordic told me to break the alliance, that SCA could not be trusted, that they aren't honorable. I listened to them. While I typed the command, I have SCA in one ear, yelling at me to stop being weak, stop being nice, and Nordic in the other ear telling me to break the alliance because they know I want to. This was it, the end of the coalition and the start of a new war. A war without Nordic, a war between friends, a war that would end in everyone's death. That's when I realized I was being used. This had been Nordic's plan. They saw my hot-headed, impulsive emotion and knew they could turn me against SCA. I was being controlled by Nordic to fight SCA without even realizing. They could stay offline, take their break, while still being on top. Once I realized this, I calmed down and talked it out with SCA and Nordic, and a peace treaty was being discussed. But SCA was not too interested in being in it at the time, and frankly, I didn't care if they were. I was still pretty mad. When I went to Vestfold to sign the treaty, I met with Panda Divino, the great warrior of Nordic. He gave me his netherite sword, which might not sound like that big of a deal, but netherite swords were disabled at that time, and only 5 existed on the whole server. He gave me this sword for nothing in return, as a token of our new friendship. I signed the treaty along with Shinsei and OE, and in this treaty it said, please like and subscribe so I can make more of these videos. That doesn't sound right. He's got a point though. I mean, you have watched it this far, haven't you? Anyway, sorry. Shinsei, OE, and Teutonic had always agreed on previous coalition discussions, but this created an even stronger bond. After this, we often referred to ourselves as SDO, and we were much closer than allies. We trained together, we fought together, we even bathed together. Okay, maybe not that last one. This enraged SCA even more. Even though they eventually made their own treaty with Nordic, they still had been excluded from our treaty. And also, it felt like SDO was made just to oppose them. Which it kinda was.